So picture the very first human words that were ever spoken.
Hmm.
You know, you're probably imagining early humans, maybe wrapped in furs, standing on this cliff edge somewhere, pointing out at a massive mountain or a raging river, and just inventing a sound for it.
Right, yeah.
Because we universally assume that language started by looking outward at the grand, sweeping landscape, assigning random grunts to rocks and water.
It's the standard, almost cinematic assumption of how human communication began. I mean, we assume the macrocosm, the big external world, was the first thing our ancestors attempted to codify.
Exactly. But today, we are pretty much tearing that assumption down to the studs. We're doing a deep dive into this really dense stack of sources. It's a manuscript and a deep analytical framework that explores ancient Armenian linguistics, the topography of the Highlands, and something the text calls the Promethean Codex.
Yeah, and we should clarify right away, when we say Promethean Codex, we aren't talking about some dusty magical book from a fantasy novel.
Right, no magic books here.
Yeah. No, we are talking about a specific analytical theory presented in our sources. One that treats ancient language not as a collection of random symbols, but as a rigid system of biological physics.
And the mission for this deep dive is to completely flip how you think about the origins of human language. So, okay, let's unpack this. Imagine an incredibly complex, unwritten linguistic code. How does it possibly survive thousands of years without being corrupted, long before anyone invented a way to write it down?
It's a huge question.
It really is. And the answer we found in the sources isn't carved in stone. It was whispered in a nursery.
Which is such a profound paradigm shift. I mean, this fundamentally challenges standard historical linguistics. We're going to explore the idea that human language didn't evolve by arbitrary random agreement.
Right.
Instead, it began as a direct physical mimicry of natural forces. And the most crucial part, the part that genuinely flips the script on everything we assume about early humans, is that the human body was the absolute first landscape to be codified.
Oh, wow.
Not the mountains, not the rivers, the flesh.
So to truly understand how we named the Earth, we have to start with the only foolproof way to pass information down through generations. You have to anchor it to the one thing every single human being possesses from the moment they're born, which is their own physical form.
Exactly.
The sources argue that long before a child traces a map or understands geography or even steps outside to look at the horizon, they are held by their mother.
And that maternal bond is the primary vehicle for linguistic survival. The text actually describes the infant's body as an unbreakable mnemonic anchor.
An unbreakable mnemonic anchor. That's a great term.
It really is. The genius of this system is its permanence. Because think about it, a child might easily forget the name of a distant river or a valley they visited once, especially if they never see it again.
Sure, yeah.
But they cannot forget the pulsing of their own veins. They can't forget the architecture of their own bone structure or the hard ridges of their teeth.
Because it's literally part of them.
Exactly. Because the foundational sounds of the language are bound to the immediate physical geography of the child's own body, the code is locked into place.
So using the body to teach language is basically like using your own hand as a map before you're ever allowed to look at a globe.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But wait. I have to push back a little, or at least challenge this premise. If the mother is anchoring this entire linguistic code to the baby's body based on the local environment, how does this survive when humans migrate? Like, does the code break if a tribe moves away from the mountains to a flat desert with no rivers?
Well, the durability of the internal biological map is exactly what solves that migration problem.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The external environment, the desert, the tundra, the mountains, that constantly changes as humans move. But the internal anatomy remains static. I mean, the human vascular system doesn't change when you cross a desert.
Right.
The architecture of the jaw remains the same. So by anchoring the sounds that describe reality to the anatomy of the infant, rather than the landscape, the mother insulates the code against the drift of time and geography.
Wow, so that is a massive departure from how we usually think about maps. It implies geography is actually secondary to biology.
And that inversion is precisely what the sources call the chronological error of standard philology.
A chronological error.
Yeah. Philology, which is the study of language history, traditionally treats linguistic sound as an arbitrary cultural token.
Like dog is just dog because we all agreed on it.
Exactly. Modern academics look at words as static lines of ink on a page and assume primitive humans looked outward at the vast wilderness first. But these sources argue that sound is an applied physical science. It's a direct mimicry of cosmic and mechanical forces.
Okay.
And the infant's own anatomy is the ultimate testing ground for these phonetic forces.
So the physical movement of the mouth is actually recreating the physical reality of the thing being named.
Yes.
And because this linguistic code is anchored to the infant's body, the primary method of teaching must be the maternal whisper. Like standard academics picture the caveman pointing at the mountain, but our sources argue the mother is the true keeper of the Promethean fire.
She is actively protecting it. She's protecting it from the analytical distortions of post-classical grammarians who divorce language from the body. And to understand how she does this, we have to look at the actual phonetic mechanics.
Okay, let's get into that.
The sources detailed 2 ancient Armenian operational verbs that explain the physics of sound perfectly. SKSE, or case, and KSVE, KSV. These are presented as the twin engines of phonetic energy.
Okay, let's break those down because the phonetic action here is fascinating. So skis, which in Armenian means to start or initiate. The sources point out that phonetically, you are moving from a sibilant S to a hard plosive K.
Right, so you're gathering the breath, the continuous hiss of the S, and pushing it outward until it strikes the hard barrier of the K.
Shku. Shku.
Yeah, I feel that. It is the literal physical action of pushing the breath outward to initiate a spark. The vocal tract is actually simulating the initiation of energy.
And then you invert it for the second verb, K gives SA, which means to rub or create friction. And here, the mouth moves from K to S.
Right. So you start with the hard boundary, the K at the back of the throat, and force the continuous breath, the S, against it. Kus.
Kus.
Like a scrape. Exactly. It's the sound of resistance. Surface contact, a line being carved into a surface. So the mother isn't just teaching abstract vocabulary here.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. It's almost like the human vocal tract is a 3D printer for reality.
Oh, I love that analogy.
When she teaches the sound for start or friction, she is literally forcing the child's vocal tract to physically recreate the spark of creation and the structural boundary of reality. The child learns to print the concept of a boundary with their throat, feeling the meaning internally long before they comprehend what the word means conceptually.
And what's fascinating here is that this somatic repetition secures the survival of the entire system.
Right.
The human security mechanism for language is built directly into the mother-child bond, relying on the most unbreakable loop in human existence. The infant is learning the foundational physics of the universe, the outward pouring of kinetic energy, and the structural friction that contains it merely by repeating the sounds of their own respiratory system.
So now that the infant has learned the physical mechanics of sound through the push and friction in their own throat, we need to look at how this scales up. Because the sources explicitly detail how specific body parts become the literal acoustic blueprints for the physical world the child will eventually step into.
Yeah, and we can trace this through the specific biological examples provided in the text. The first one is yerak, which is the ancient Armenian word for vein.
Vein, okay.
Long before a child ever sees a rushing river or a stream, the mother points to the pulsing blue line on the child's wrist and whispers, yerak.
And through this acoustic strike, the infant learns that the prefix yer represents the vehicle of fluid branching extension. It's not a theory they read in a book, right? It's a biological truth.
Right, they feel it.
They feel the blood pulsing, branching out through their own arm. They learn that yer means the extension of life force.
Exactly. The biology dictates the linguistics. And the text provides a second, equally critical example regarding hard structural boundaries, which is agra.
Agra.
Yeah, agra translates to tooth or bone. So before the child ever encounters a jagged rock formation or a biting mountain ridge, they feel the hard, calcified ridges growing inside their own mouth. Agra.
The mechanics of saying agra are so aggressive. You pair the back of the throat plosive with a rolling, almost grinding vibration.
It really is. It's the sound of bone, of crushing, of defensive structural barriers. The infant internalizes the concept of a hard physical boundary by exploring their own teeth with their tongue while feeling the vibration of the word in their jaw.
So it's like every body part is a compressed zip file of geographical data. When the child learns the word for tooth, they are subconsciously downloading the concept of a mountain range without even knowing it.
That is exactly what the sources are arguing. The mouth literally becomes the foundational template for the canyon, and the human nervous and vascular systems become the absolute template for the valley drainage network. The macrocosm, the external world, is fundamentally a projection of the microcosm, the body.
But at some point, though, that child grows up, right? They've mastered their internal map. They know their veins, their teeth, the push and pull of their own breath.
Yeah.
And eventually, they step out of the valley and look outward at the vast regional topography for the first time.
Yeah, they see the mountains and the massive river systems.
And the incredible assertion here is that they do not have to invent new words for any of this external geography.
No, they don't. They simply project their deeply ingrained biological map onto the macrocosm. When they see the biting, jagged peaks of the mountains catching the snow, those peaks literally become the agra, the teeth of the earth chewing the clouds.
Wow.
The physical properties of the mountain are perceived as identical to the physical properties of the jawbone.
And when they look upon the great river systems of the region, they don't see an abstract body of water. They recognize a macrocosmic yerak, a giant branching vein. Which brings us directly to one of the most famous ancient rivers in the world, the Araxes, originally recorded as Arask or Yerask.
Yes, the Yerask. And to understand the significance of the Yerask, we have to establish the physical reality of the geography discussed in the sources.
Right.
The Armenian Highlands do not function merely as a flat piece of land. Topographically, the region acts as a massive hydrographic dome.
A hydrographic dome. Let's make sure we clearly define how that works geographically for everyone listening.
Okay, so if you look at a physical map of the region's drainage networks, the highlands form a high-altitude volcanic plateau. And because of this elevation and the specific topography, it serves as the central fountainhead, a localized geographic knot, where the headwaters of major world-shaping rivers all originate within a remarkably tight radius.
So all these massive historical rivers are essentially starting in the exact same elevated neighborhood.
Precisely. You have the Tigris and the Euphrates gathering water there and flowing south down to Sumer in the Persian Gulf. You have the Phasis flowing west to the Black Sea, and the Araxes, the Yerask, flowing east and north to the Caspian Sea.
So they're spreading out everywhere.
Right. The waters don't just flow in a single direction. They radiate outward from a central point to the separate seas of the ancient world.
Bringing it back to the linguistics of that eastern river, the Yerask, the sources break this name down into two crucial phonetic components, Yer and Ask. We've already established Yer from Yerak, the vein, denoting that fluid branching extension. But the sources also connect this root to the concept of bifurcation.
Yeah, this is key. In Armenian, the root yer also forms the foundation for the number 2, yurgu. To create the number 2 is to create the very first bifurcation. It's a separation of a single path into a left and a right.
Right, a fork.
Exactly. And then you have the second root, ask. In this primordial linguistic formation, ask functions as a root, handling the concept of origin, ancestral seed, or the human vessel.
So what does this all mean for our map of the world? When we combine these concepts, if the river is called Yerask, translating to something like the forked ancestral container, and we know it's a macro version of a human vein, does that suggest the entire Earth is mirroring the human nervous system?
If we follow the analytical framework of the sources, absolutely. Think about human neurology and vascular structure. The absolute archetype of that yer sound is the bifurcation of a nerve or an artery.
Okay.
The human nervous system must bifurcate. It has to constantly split to distribute the bioelectric spark from the center of the brain down into the limbs.
A central hub sending branching lines out everywhere to keep the organism alive.
Exactly. Just as the primary neural pathways must fork to distribute energy, the waters of the Earth undergo a massive geographical yer event at the Armenian hydrographic dome. The water gathers at the central high-altitude knot, splits, and radiates outward. The river is essentially an externalized axon. It carries the AR, which the sources identify as the ancient syllable for light, fire, or the solar creative spark, out of the highland center and distributes it to the rest of the world.
The conceptual overlap is staggering. The map of the Earth's drainage basins and the map of the human neural pathways are being described using the exact same phonetic vocabulary.
It really is incredible.
And the sources even trace this linguistic DNA all the way into modern English, specifically focusing on the root yer.
Right. Think about the Proto-Indo-European root for year, representing the cycle of time. It's rooted in that exact same phonetic concept of moving, progressing, and reaching for an endpoint.
And the English word yearn, an internal pulling force, a reaching desire, it shares that foundational DNA. The river, the Yerask, functions as the yearning flow. It is constantly moving, cycling through time, physically forking through the valleys, driven by that same internal pressure.
But the mechanics go even deeper when we look at the evolution of the river's name into the Araxes.
Oh, right.
We have the AR sound, the fire or spark, and then we have the AKS sound, or the letter X. The sources spend a significant amount of time detailing the physical friction of that X sound in the throat.
Yeah, the English letter X represents an intersection, a crossroad. Phonetically, it's the sound of a strike, of immense friction. Like, if ASK is the seed or the water pouring out, AKS is the rigid vessel that catches and contains it. ARAKS is the creative light captured and moving within a highly structural, restrictive channel.
This is where the physics of the throat perfectly align with the physics of the geography. When you make that X or AKS sound, you are forcing air from your lungs through the narrow channel of your vocal cords, striking it against the hard palate and teeth. It requires pressure and a rigid boundary.
And that physical action in the mouth is the exact mechanical equivalent of water under immense pressure carving its way through a solid rock canyon. The language literally encodes the physics of the landscape into the muscular movement of speaking. The river is the flowing blueprint of the ASK thesis, a fluid container carrying the primordial spark out of the Highlands. It absolutely refuses to be deciphered by flat, ink-on-paper grammar until you understand the operational mechanics of the human throat.
It's a fully realized, self-contained system.
It really is. I mean, we started this journey in the quiet intimacy of a nursery, with a mother pointing to her infant's wrist, teaching them the word for their vein, yerak, and the ridges of their teeth, agra. And we explored how that exact biological acoustic code, the pushes of breath and the friction in the throat, scaled up. It became the literal blueprint used to name the massive forking rivers and the jagged mountain ranges of the earth. We've seen that language isn't just a collection of arbitrary symbols agreed upon by a tribe. It is a living, breathing, biological map.
And this exploration raises a profound final question from the Promethean Codex framework, something really crucial to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We've established that the microcosm, the human body, and the macrocosm, the geography of the Earth, perfectly mirror each other through the exact same acoustic code. But what if they were named simultaneously?
Named simultaneously. Wait, you mean the body and the earth codified at the exact same moment?
The sources propose this fascinating theoretical conclusion. If a Prometheus figure, a godfather of language, executed this naming process, it wouldn't happen piece by piece over centuries. It would happen as a single, simultaneous cosmic strike.
Oh, wow.
The sky, the earth, the rivers, the vein, the tooth, the nervous system, all of them cast from the exact same acoustic mold at the exact same moment in time.
Which carries an extraordinary implication for something we do every single day.
It implies that every single time you speak, your vocal tract is not just communicating a random utilitarian thought. You are physically recreating the exact cosmic strike that formed both your own nervous system and the rivers of the earth. You are constantly acting out the mechanics of creation right there in the muscles of your throat.
That is just. The origin of language isn't carved in stone on a distant mountain. It was whispered in a nursery, and it is happening every single time we open our mouths. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. Keep questioning the world around you, and remember, the map of the universe might just be written in your own pulse. Catch you next time.